Always a pleasure to welcome Ty Anderson into the show to talk a little bit about the Boston Bruins. And Ty, it's weird to look at them in the standings and be like, okay, the record's all right, 8-8-3. I know that's, below 500 wins losses wise, but a 500 points percentage. Yet there are concerns with this Bruins team, a Bruins organization that used to be synonymous with working hard. And then I read a quote from Jim Montgomery that says you can't plan for a lack of juice. So what's behind the vibeless efforts the Bruins have been putting forth?
I mean, sometimes a record is deceiving, right? 8-8-3. You can say, oh, they're playing hard, but they're not getting results. Like, no, that's perfectly what this team is. They have at no point this year been 2 games over 500. Every time you think there's a step forward, they suffer a loss that borders on humiliating the next game out. They just can't generate momentum of any sort here. And it really begins at the top, in my opinion. Guys like Pastrnak have not been the superstar players that we know they are. Charlie McAvoy, I'd include him in that grouping, has his game starting to come around a little bit, but out of the gate, it wasn't the level it needs to be at for this team. So basically right now, what you're seeing is your top dogs aren't pulling their weight. You saw it in St. Louis when they had that third period comeback, but that the Dallas loss happens, that goes out the window. Saturday, they lose to a Blues team that's missing, 4 of their regular defensemen, it feels like. So they just haven't been able to build anything here. And I think that we talk about the top guys, but you look at the secondary cast, Zacha, Coyle, Geeky, Frederick, nobody's pulling their weight right now, aside from maybe Jonas Korpisalo and the fourth line. That's not typically a good recipe for success for any team, let alone the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, no doubt, Ty. I want to focus for a second on the 2 big offseason additions. Neither one has been very good to start in Nikita Zadorov or Elias Lindholm. Which one has been more surprising to you for the slow start?
I think Lindholm, because at the end of the day, like, you kind of know with Zadorov, you're going to get the good, the bad, and the ugly. He's going to have some great plays where he goes end to end and scores a beautiful goal or makes a beautiful play happen, and then he's going to take a bad penalty at the other end. I think we've seen a mix of all of that this year. He's going to make some bad pinches, some bad reads. It's just kind of who he is as a player. It's not a bad thing, but there's always a balancing act there with him. With Lindholm, like, this is a guy that they thought would be their first line center, clicking with David Pastrnak. He'd be, a Bergeron-esque player, which I always hated because, like, Bergeron is like once in a generation. Yeah. Like, and if you're saying, oh, he's like him, it's like, that's already setting him up for failure. But I think realistically, he hasn't been good enough and he hasn't generated enough. And talking to him on Sunday, kind of scary how little confidence he has right now, where we're talking to him about, what do you got to do to get your game right? And he's like, I'm just skating up and down the ice right now. I'm not doing anything. And it's like, okay, I appreciate you falling on the sword, but you got to have a little bit of confidence. He just doesn't have any right now. And he's not driving a line. He's not scoring. The details are there. Like, he still has some good two-way play, but they're paying over $7 million for him to put up some points. And if the points aren't coming, there's no amount of details that are going to make that signing feel okay for the Bruins, who have been starved for a top-line center since Bergeron retired.
Yeah, maybe we should go back and check the quotes from Lindholm not too long after he arrived in Vancouver too, because they don't sound all that different. And then he ended up finding his game in the playoffs just fine. So maybe that's a recipe for him to get back in the mix. Have to ask about Jim Montgomery. Where do you come out on his current status? It kind of feels like in some ways this team's at a crossroads, not really for this season, but big picture. Are you either extending this guy? And if you are, do it now so that everyone can get comfortable and used to the idea that he's not going anywhere and you better snap to attention. Or if you're going to do that, then just pull off the Band-Aid and let him go now and make a change.
Yeah, that's where I align with it. I think this whole lame duck, you don't say anything about it, you let it linger, like, that's doing nobody any good right now. And I think the players kind of know it's hanging over the team. I think Jim Montgomery has pushed every button he possibly can. Now, when it comes to letting him go or keeping him, I'm not really, like, I don't have strong feelings about it either way. I think that he's a coach, but as we know, coaches now, their shelf life has never been shorter. He's the 10th longest tenured head coach in the NHL. If he were hired 17 days earlier, he'd be the 5th longest tenured head coach in the NHL. So it's interesting how these guys, like, the message kind of fades. And I think that when I look at it, though, like, what are they going to do? Are they going to fire the coach and all of a sudden guys are going to start shooting 10% now versus the 4%? That could happen, sure. But, and I hate using this term because I think Jim Montgomery is a good guy. Right now, he's a human shield for Don Sweeney and Cam Neely and the way they've built this roster. This roster is not good enough. They talked about adding speed and secondary scoring. They got slower and they added no scoring. In fact, they let DeBrusque, Heinen, JVR, they let them all walk. And they had no replacements for them. So right now, I feel like Jim Montgomery, right or wrong, is a human shield for management and their shortcomings. And that's not a good recipe. And I think Montgomery has done a good job of trying to find the right buttons, but you're going to hit a point where you're out of buttons to push. And I think we're getting close to there.
Before Tyler asks you about Swayman, can you just say JVR one more time?
JVR.
There you go. All right, good.
Well, you want JVR? Is that what you want?
That's what I wanted. Yeah, there you go.
I got you.
I'll wrap up with the Jeremy Swayman question. He obviously gets that big ticket, but it caused him to be late to camp, or basically didn't have a training camp. When you look at these numbers from Swayman, is it a little bit of the group in front of him's letting it down, or is it the reverse where they need their number one guy to just flat out be better?
I hate to sit on the fence there, but a little bit of both. I think the Dallas game was a kind of a bad game for him. There was a couple of goals there where it's like, you got to have that. You can't let that happen. You got to keep your game in it. You got to keep your team in it. At the same time, though, I think that what we're learning here is that going from 0 to 60 as a full-time workhorse goaltender after being in a tandem for 3 years is not that easy. And I think there are some stats here that are telling. When he's played the second game of a 2-3, Swayman has an 887 save percentage, and he's 1-4. When he has at least 2 days of rest this year, he's 2-2-2 with a 908. It's a 31 point percentage swing in the save percentage. And I think 5-on-5, he's been good. The PK, he hasn't been good enough. And that's a big difference from a year ago, where when they were on the kill, he and Linus Ullmark were their best killers. They would snuff out all these chances because they were allowing quite a bit, but they were unbelievable in terms of how they played. Right now, it hasn't been there. I think, yeah, the contract, the missing training camp has definitely played a factor, but this is part of the deal. When you're a top 5 goaltender now, money-wise, you got to carry the team because they can't build around you and give you the best defense in the world and the best PK. You got to be that guy, kind of like how Tuukka was in the early years of his big money contract extension. So a lot of pressure, but he's got to be better, and they got to stop taking so many penalties because that's what's really killing them right now for sure.
We'll see if Boston can get things back on track there in action tonight. Ty Anderson, you can find him at 98.5 The Sports Hub. Appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.